Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
DuWayne Severson of Janesville is a Republican candidate in the 44th Assembly District. DuWayne, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve, for the time.
Well, you spent a lot of time in local governments, 9 years on the Janesville School Board, 3 years on the Janesville City Council. Let's talk about property taxes. We're a high property tax state. And because of that, local governments like you've served on have had to live with property tax caps and limits for more than 20 years. If you're a member of the Assembly voting on the next state budget, do we keep those property tax caps and limits, or do we get rid of them, sir?
Great question, Steve. Thank you again for this for the time today. You know, having served on the school board and the city council, I understand things have changed over the last 15 to 20 years. Some communities are having a real struggle to be able to provide the services that they do. So I'm open to such things, re-looking at those property tax caps, but also looking at perhaps local state or local sales taxes. If a community wants to include that in their total toolbox, I'm a big proponent of local control. Let the local jurisdictions handle and generate the funds that they believe they need. Then the community can decide whether or not those are the right things and the right taxes that being levied against them. But I think we need to re-look at it. Things have changed, things evolved, and so we need to be open to making those changes to provide the services that are needed in our communities.
So just to clarify, you're really open to giving local governments a lot more alternative revenue sources, correct?
Well, if they so choose, and also I think what we've seen through the pandemic is that people and organizations are being more creative on how they get things done. An example right here, you and I are having this conversation via Zoom. Before I'm sure we did this in person, things like that. So, let's see if there's other innovations that we may be able to provide those services in a different way that we haven't in the past.
Well, you mentioned the pandemic. Just three questions on that.
Sure.
State Senate Republicans has said they would like to reconvene and repeal the governor's statewide mask edict. What's your position on the mask edict, sir?
Yeah, great question. Going again, I think this is a local control. I think what's good in Janesville may not be what's right in Green Bay. What's right in Madison may not be what's right in Bayfield. What's good in La Crosse may not be what's good in Milwaukee. I think local officials working with the local public health departments gives us the best results. They know the employers, they know the school situation, they know their communities better than on a one-size-fits-all. Let's have the science drive it. Let's drive it down to the individual communities rather than apply a one-size-fits-all approach.
Well, you worked for SSM Health until April. Let me ask you a question.
James, I work for Mercy Health System.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
We've seen the role that hospitals in Wisconsin and nationally have played treating COVID-19 patients. If you're in the Assembly voting on the next state budget, do hospitals deserve an even greater priority than they might have in the current state budget?
Good question. Hospitals, they serve a very important function in any community. People move to communities, they live, businesses go to communities based upon healthcare. That's one of the main things that they look at is the healthcare delivered to their families and to their employees. Hospitals have taken a hit with the COVID-19. Outpatient revenue is one of the main sources of revenue for hospitals, and that was dramatically impacted because they couldn't provide those services. They had to provide the opportunity to take care of the COVID-19 patients. I was happy to see that the governor allocated about $500 million from the CARES Act to the hospitals. That's great. That said, hospitals, along with all other organizations, all other companies in our state, have had to make adjustments to how their business model moves forward. So staffing needs to be looked at on the hospital basis, the services that they provide. We're going to have a tight budget moving forward in the next biennium. That's got to be balanced against all the other needs. We're not even halfway through this issue, the impacts of COVID-19. So we need to look at everything together. Does it need to be looked at and see what the impacts might be? Yes, but it needs to be taken in conjunction with all other services provided by the state.
State Senator Chris Capping just filed a bill, and it says this: if you're a business or an organization and you follow COVID guidelines,
yep,
to protect your employers or your customers, you could not be sued. Do we need that state law, DuWayne?
Great question. I think for the most part, employers, businesses have taken the necessary precautions to prevent their employees and their customers from contracting COVID-19. So in that situation, if an employer is doing that, I'm for protecting employers from being sued. Now, if we have a situation where an employer, a business, does not take the necessary steps to protect their employees, to protect their customers from contracting COVID-19, then there has to be remedies for those situations.
Well, we just saw a report that tax collections held up in the year that ended June 30, but there's concern about the current year tax collections. If we're $1 billion short, do we cut spending or do we turn to raising taxes or fees?
Great question. I think it's a combination. As I've done some research on this, it might come out to, and it depends upon, what you look at, maybe 5 to 10% of the total budget. Having worked in healthcare for 34 years, having been on the school board for 9 and the city council for 3, I've gone through those situations where there's always some sort of reduction in the budget that you set up because of things that might occur. You have to make those tough decisions. There's always open jobs that have not been filled. Those can be put on hold. Things like conferences and the like, some of those lower lying operational changes that can be done. I've seen it across the board in every situation. That might account for about 1 to 3% of any total budget. Then you talk about the actual services that are being provided to individuals within our state. We have to seriously look at what's left, what the gap is, and then assess what needs to be done, what needs to be provided to our citizens. So some reductions may have to take place. We may have to look at some increases in revenues, keeping in mind that, businesses and individuals are facing the same struggles as the state is, and it's hard for them to pay more. So it's got to be a combination of things.
As states around Wisconsin legalize medical and recreational marijuana, what's your position on that, sir?
Great question. We've seen really the advancement of utilizing additional medical or the additional drugs and the like for patients. The long term is patients and physicians have to determine what's best for them to be able to treat that particular patient. So I'm open to using medical marijuana for a patient need. The key thing is it has to be science driven. What's the science behind it to make sure that it really will have the efficacy that it's needed for a particular patient? As far as recreational marijuana, I'm concerned, having read some issues in the state of Colorado, the first state that legalized marijuana. I see increased services demands on mental and behavioral health services. I'm concerned about just legalizing recreational marijuana just for revenue purposes. I think it takes advantage of individuals. And then again, those other social services, which might be needed because maybe a person cannot, they have issues with utilizing marijuana. I'm not sure of the net impact, the net benefit to our society. So I've got some concerns about the legalization of recreational marijuana.
New subject. The governor has asked for passage of a 9-bill package on policing reforms. The speaker is forming a task force. Senator Van Wanggaard has his own bills drafted. What policing reforms do you support? Do you support the governor?
Well, I have the advantage of serving on our Police and Fire Commission for 5 years. So I've had the opportunity to work with some really great people the services that they provide to our community. I was happy to see that the speakers task force will include both Representatives Diggs and Stinky. I think what's really very encouraging is the inclusion of community members on this task force. So I think that's going to provide us the necessary information to make appropriate, to address the racial disparities, the educational opportunities, the public safety and policing standards. So I'm encouraged about that. Quick example here in the city of Janesville, we don't use chokeholds, and some of the other issues that the governor has addressed are already in place. And I think they're already in place in a number of communities. We could use Janesville and I think other communities in the state of Wisconsin as guidelines, hold them up as a model if there were any laws that we might be considering.
Okay, in the debate in the Capitol over who should draw the next congressional and legislative district lines, the Constitution says the party in control in the Capitol, the governor recommends a People's Maps Commission that would draw the lines and then forward it to the legislature to enact. How do you come down on that issue?
Thank you. We have a Constitution. The Constitution calls for the legislature to draw the lines, and it calls for the governor to veto or accept the redistricting that's been drawn up. If there's issues, it goes to court. I'm concerned about deviating from the Constitution on this issue as well as others. We have a Constitution in place to live by. If people have concerns as to how the Constitution is written and how we should apply it, that's fine. That's where, again, being on the school board for 9 years, I've seen the benefit of educating people. Go ahead, go out there and educate the community. Show them how you want to make changes to a particular law or the Constitution itself. So go ahead and make those changes. Elect people into those offices that'll make those changes. But let's follow the Constitution as it's written. That's the benefit. I think that's the security that we have in our society to live by those rules, the Constitution, and that's set up.
The debate over highway funding, so critically important to the Madison to the Illinois border corridor. Governor Evers last year recommended raising the gas tax. It's now 30.9 cents. Hasn't been raised in 10 or 12 years.
Sure.
To stabilize highway funding, could you vote to raise the gas tax?
Steve, I think this is an area that we definitely need to look at for a couple of reasons. One, again, things change. We've got dynamics that have changed over the last several years that need to be addressed in how we fund and take care of our roads to make sure that they're drivable for everybody. We have higher efficiency vehicles, both cars and trucks, less gas being used. And we've got the expansion of electric vehicles. It may only be 2 to 3% of the total vehicles that are out there, but we know that the innovation continues to increase. We'll continue to see that both in cars as well as trucks. So it has to be addressed. I'm open to such things as a transportation utility fund, either locally or regionally, that might be applied to our roads. We have to address it. But I think there's a number of areas that we need to look at. Just simply raising the tax to raise the tax doesn't take into account innovation and really the change that we've seen in our state.
With your 12 years experience on the school board and the city council, let me ask this question. When school boards and local governments plan major public works projects, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses? A study found that in 2015, out-of-state contractors for public works project got $72 million, but that $72 million doubled to $146 million in 2018. Should local governments like you served on have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
A great question. I'll take the school board as the prime example. As we know, in the state of Wisconsin, the school board and the school tax is the largest portion of anybody's real estate bill. People notice it. I can tell you for the couple of referendums, at the time I was on the school board, we passed the largest referendum in the state of Wisconsin for improvement of our schools. The discussion is first and foremost has to be the quality of the services that are provided by the builders for our schools. But it also has to come in at a cost that the taxpayer can accept. So Cost has to be one of the main drivers. Having said that, I'm open to possibly waiting in favor of Wisconsin builders for these projects. If we can keep those dollars recirculating back into our community, we all win. We keep those, their families utilize our schools, they utilize our services in our communities. So as much as possible, if we can utilize Wisconsin builders, definitely. But it's got to be balanced. It's got to be balanced to make sure that we bring it in at the highest quality and at the lowest cost for taxpayers.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. Is there any one issue that's important to your campaign that I haven't asked about?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Safety and security, Steve, I've been out knocking on just a few thousand doors here in the city of Janesville. What I'm hearing from folks, the main issue when they chat is what's going on in our country? How is it impacting us? They've seen what's happened in New York. They've seen what's happened in St. Louis, Seattle, Portland, Madison, even Kenosha. They're concerned for their families. They're concerned for their property. And so some of the things that are being done, at the state level, I'm very encouraged by. But safety and security, that's the main driver that I see. I want to work with our community to be able to provide a safe community for our people to live in and feel comfortable to go out, to send their kids to school. And just really also the COVID-19 impacts. Again, I've seen job situations where people have lost jobs. I want to get those job opportunities back into our community. Educational, what's the impact on education? I've seen, we know that there's going to be some form of virtual education throughout this year. It may occur in the next couple of years. So what are the resources needed for students? What are the resources needed for teachers and for parents? And lastly, public health. One of the things I think we've really seen over the last 6 months is the impact on our public health departments. They haven't been appropriately funded. They haven't been appropriately staffed. I think we have to relook at that so that the information that's provided to take care of most vulnerable individuals it's out there on a timely and accurate basis, and to ensure that the decisions that are made by public health departments affecting our businesses are accurate and timely. We need to make sure that it's not detrimental for the long-term sustainability of our businesses.
Final question. Do you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponent on November 3?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I appreciate again the time. I've had the opportunity, unlike my opponent, to work and serve at the Janesville School Board for 9 years, the Janesville City Council for 3 years, and the Police and Fire Commission for 5. I've worked with individuals throughout our community that have been elected by others within the community to serve and to get things done. I've shown the ability to work on major projects that affect the school, bringing in a new city manager, bringing in a bringing in a new fire chief. So being able to work with a number of different people from a number of different outlooks is something I can bring to our community and serve our community as well as the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you. DuWayne Severson of Janesville is a Republican candidate in the 44th Assembly District. The election is November 3. DuWayne, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Steve. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you, sir.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.